So good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. We have an exciting agenda today. I am going to take a little bit of a backseat once we get things up and running and hand some of the facilitation over to Nancy to walk us through our conversation. But we have a couple of guests this morning here to talk about the childcare issues that we have been discussing on and off for it feels like about 2 years at this point throughout the pandemic. So I think Jackie and is it Cellissa? If you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then I think we can jump right in.
All right. Well, thank you, James. How do you do, everybody? I'm Jackie Cowell. I'm the Executive Director of Early Learning New Hampshire. We are a statewide nonprofit working on public awareness around the importance of the early years, as well as childcare, both advocacy and membership services for childcare programs, their workforce and the families they serve. Just a quick introduction of who we are. Delightful to see you all, and McCall, fun to see you again. We just got to meet McCall, and we'll tell you a little bit about some of the activities we've been doing. And Cellissa Hoyt, I'm going to throw it over to Cellissa, who is still working a very part-time for Early Learning New Hampshire, has for years, and she'll talk about that. And she's got a new role too. Hi, Cellissa.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Cellissa Hoyt, and as Jackie said, I work part-time for Early Learning New Hampshire now after working almost 10 years in a much full-time and some part-time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, but I have to start by just saying I've been in the field, in the early childhood field, for 35 plus years. And when I started, I actually was working for many years for running a program in Durham. And Warren was the one who invited me to come today. And I've known Warren for 30 plus years because his children attended that program and he served on the board. So we have a long history of working together. So some of our work, which you'll hear more about, has been a shared service alliance in New Hampshire to help childcare programs access more resources. But the work that I'm doing now, I just started full-time for CCA Global, and some of the work that I'm involved with here is connected to the State Early Learning Alliance in the last 10 plus years that we've been doing that work in New Hampshire. But my current role is helping New Hampshire and 33 other states tap into resources that strengthen their business practices, help them save money by pooled purchasing, et cetera. So we'll get into that a little bit as we get underway. So Jackie and I are going to spend some time talking to you about what's going on in the childcare field, what we see happening currently, why the staffing shortage has gotten so much deeper and how that's impacting businesses, families' ability to find care, businesses who are trying to hire their employees who need childcare, et cetera. So we'll talk a little bit about what we see happening, and then there are some really exciting strategies and opportunities, some that are shovel ready and up and running now that can make a difference for programs, and things that are urgently needed. And then there are also strategies that are looking at longer term, bigger solutions that will take more time to make a sort of a long-term impact in the field. So I think Jackie and I, before we get into, dive a little bit more into what we see happening and in childcare programs and what opportunities there are in New Hampshire, we would love to just hear a little bit from you about what your conversations have revolved around, what you see happening with the businesses that you're working with, and maybe your own businesses. So could we open it up there? James or Nancy, could we hear a little bit from you folks?
Sure, absolutely. You basically just outlined all the questions I was going to ask you. So we're on the same page about what we want to learn about today. First of all, just thank you both very much for taking the time to be with us. I think childcare is one of those issues like housing that we see really affecting workforce and the economy hugely. Having said that, I think we haven't had as much discussion or experts around childcare. So this is a really exciting opportunity for us to understand more. I personally, I mean, we know a lot anecdotally, and a few of us on the staff and in the group definitely have either are still in the daycare system or recently graduated from the daycare system. So there's a lot of sort of personal knowledge, but I think looking at it sort of with a wider umbrella will be very helpful for us to understand. Would anyone like to jump in with your own experiences around this issue?
As a current parent of a 3-year-old who's in a daycare that we really love, I've experienced probably a lot of the salient issues over the past couple of years. Initially when we were trying to get her in as an infant, she was waitlisted for probably 3 or 4 months. So we had to hire a nanny to cover that gap. And that, went to its own odd place of becoming an actual employer within our household and having to figure out, do we withhold taxes and all of that. The COVID situation is one. She's been out probably 3 or 4 different times for at least a week, whether it was when daycares initially shut down, when she needed to get a COVID test to come back and the tests were taking forever to come back. And then finally, at the beginning of February, she actually brought COVID home and the whole family got it. So we were having the fun of dealing with sick kid plus still trying to do work, and all of that jazz.
Well, that was about as perfectly laid out as it could be, James. Right? And so again, Nancy, guide us, but we could jump right in a little bit to some of the solutions. It sounds, we both, Cellissa and I've had a chance to read your report, of course, and as understanding the why that you've come, the conclusion you've come to of why, like housing, it's one of the most important things. So if you want, Nancy, we can sort of jump right in a little bit to some of the solutions. Would you like us to do that?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll start and then Cellissa why don't you go right after me? So again, just as context, you get it. I mean, James, I've been in the field in New Hampshire. I've run childcare programs in the past, hardest job I've ever had. And I've had hard jobs before. Boy, nothing like it. It's the hardest job in the world and it's not because the people in the field aren't competent. It's the system. Right? The system is really set up, as you all know, to be fragile. It's so dependent on the ability of parents with young children to pay. And it's, and in order to do that well and not charge parents more than they can afford, the teachers tend to have low salaries, right? So it's a system set up for difficulty. And, when I was running a childcare program in New Hampshire, 2 different ones, one in Henniker, one in Portsmouth, that was the hardest part of the job, watching parents whose children were thriving to have to leave because they couldn't afford it. And we could not find a way to offset their tuition. And we just couldn't do it. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to watch the teachers leave who were phenomenal. And they went to Target because they could make more and have better insurance. It was just a fragile system far before the pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated things. And what's been interesting is that the pandemic has given me, in my 30+ years in New Hampshire working in childcare, both the most hope that change is coming and real change is coming because people are understanding the importance of childcare to the economy, but also the most worry I've ever had about programs' viability. And so the folks on this call, it's really terrific that you've talked about how can you help folks with their operating costs? How can you help? You're really going deep into it. What are the resources that can help them have viable, strong businesses while the affordability for the employees to be able to go to work? So it's really a 2-generational approach, childcare, both supporting the workforce of today, as we've all known, but it's really preparing the workforce of tomorrow. It's 20 years from now. A child born today is going to graduate from high school in 2040. And how do we prepare them for that? Childcare can really do a terrific job helping them succeed in school, helping the families work, but it's really a two-generational approach about shaping tomorrow's workforce too. So I'll sort of go over to Cellissa for a few comments, and then I'll go back with a few more actual solutions. Cellissa?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, actually, I have to say, James, when you were sharing your story, it reminded me of when I was managing a program, and a family who had a 2-year-old in our program, they actually got on the wait list for an infant before they were pregnant, because they waited so long to get their toddler in that they thought, okay, we're going to start trying to have a baby, so we need to get on the wait list now. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that's just horrible. So I think I just want to add a little bit to what Jackie said. I don't think we need to go into a lot about this, but just to sort of set the stage for why childcare programs are in this even deeper staffing shortage than they were prior to the pandemic. When I was a director, I really felt like staffing was one of our greatest challenges, but we kind of limped along. And then the pandemic hit, and I haven't managed a program in the pandemic, but what I see happening is that the staffing shortage in childcare businesses deepened to a real devastating level. It was sort of a mass exodus of people who left for better paying jobs during the pandemic, or who decided to retire because working in childcare in a pandemic was so incredibly difficult. So what's happening right now is something I've never seen in my 35 years in the field, and that is that programs are very, very under-enrolled, and it's not because they don't have a wait list. They have very long wait lists. They have space in their classrooms to take those children, and in fact, sometimes they have classrooms that are empty that they could take children in, but they don't have enough teachers to staff those classrooms. So, I'll give you one example. There's a program in Portsmouth that I've known for decades and worked closely with. They have a building with 16 classrooms, and 6 of them are empty. And again, it's not because they don't have a wait list, it's because they have no teachers to put in those classrooms. So this is what we see happening. We do have some short-term, quick, what we would call strategies that will help retain the current workforce, because people haven't stopped leaving the field. These programs that are so short their teachers are still losing teachers, if not daily, weekly, throughout the state. And then there are also strategies to help with recruitment. And there are some sort of pipeline systems that we had in place prior to the pandemic, or even a few years prior to that, that have sort of disintegrated, and we need to rebuild them and put them back in place. So I'm going to pass it back to Jackie and let her start talking about strategies and solutions.
Great, thank you, Cellissa. So first of all, to the part of looking at what we need to do simultaneously is forward thinking, strengthening the fragility of the system, because it was always fragile, while having our feet firmly planted on the ground of the reality of today, and not, and making sure we do some shovel-ready quick things to do as much as we can to retain the current workforce while we try to recruit. And so again, all that we want to do the first thing we need to do is just stem the brain drain. Stop the brain drain as fast as we can. Whatever we can do to retain the current talent. They have been through so much in the last 2 years of navigating and running a program during the pandemic. It has been really hard. People are really exhausted. So solutions there. What can be done to retain? What can be done to recruit? And then what can be done to strengthen the system? That has always been fragile. So let's just start with the immediate, the shovel-ready kinds of things that Cellissa and I and many partners have been working on. And as I said, McCall was recently part of a very fast-track solution-based thinking around having businesses support childcare businesses and vice versa. And so the first thing to tell you about is there is a bill in the legislature, Senate Bill 446, that is aimed at doing what some other states have done successfully, of giving quarterly bonuses. Raising the wage is a really important thing. That's a long-term solution. It'll take a lot of effort, probably some federal effort as well as state effort. But bonuses and retention and benefits for staying on, not just signing on, not just a sign-on bonus, stay on bonuses as well as sign-on bonuses. It's crafted in a way that other states have found actually helps retain. So Senate Bill 446, SB 446 is still in the Senate. And there was a letter of support that went out with over 1,800 signatures from a variety of folks, including 195 businesses. So it's got broad support to implement a bonus and benefit program. So quarterly bonuses, depending on how long you've been in the field, as well as benefits. Going back to what Cellissa said, this idea of shared services, I'll explain what that is. It's a in the childcare field, it's an innovation that has been around economy of scale. So it's an optional economy of scale membership in something called, like Cellissa said, the State Early Learning Alliance, CELA. CELA is run as an initiative of our Early Learning New Hampshire, our statewide nonprofit, which has joint buying, both national, as Cellissa said, over 33 states, joint buying that really reduces costs immediately for the childcare program that can be reinvested into their staff, also for the staff, also for the families they serve. It's discounts and cost savings. That's one feature of this shovel-ready childcare specific economy of scale model, CELA. CELA is also in as an option for the childcare programs in the Senate Bill 446. You may know Howard Brodsky at CCA Global that Cellissa works for. He helped craft this along with Lou Gargiulo from Exeter, his Great North Property Managers. Those two businesses helped shape this. Stephanie Shaheen, who many of you may know, started it originally about 10 years ago. Again, all the clout and the businesses coming together, negotiating on behalf of many different programs, saving costs for both the programs, real costs, and saving money back in the pockets of the workforce themselves and actually the families they serve. It's a unique model that's shovel ready, that is ready to be launched out further. That can help immediately, again, with the bonuses and benefits, to stave off some of the brain drain as well as some recruitment. That's ready. We have also looked at, in terms of the Gopher discretionary ARPA dollars. So there's also, so Gopher, the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery, you all know, has some discretionary dollars, as does the Department of Health and Human Services. How can we amplify those together? Look at the plans together, what could be amplified and helped? And so we're going to be talking soon with Commissioner Taylor Caswell, who charged a few of us with go back and ask, what are some really great ways that businesses and childcare businesses can support each other? And so we are going to be meeting hopefully in the next week or so with Commissioner Taylor Caswell with a very specific ask around the Gopher dollars that we will share with you as well. But it's really around both what we just talked about, these shovel-ready bonuses and benefits and money back in the pocket that's ready to go now. There are some long-term things that HHS and many of us really want to see happen as well. And then there's also things like the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, right? Has an amazing ability to help both the workforce and the programs. So if they have more capital and more ability for financing, that can help programs. The first thing, of course, is the workforce, the childcare workforce. Building new programs and expanding doesn't help when you've got 6 classrooms closed in your community. Let's open those first. Let's find the way to get the staffing. Let's reopen those programs first. And then let's think about what other more spaces. So looking at it community-wide, many businesses supporting each other, supporting many childcare programs and vice versa. This is Taylor Caswell's challenge to us. instead of one business, maybe a large one has a childcare center, right? That could help their employees, but can we craft something, because New Hampshire has so many small businesses, and so are the childcare programs are so many small businesses. What can we do so that they can partner with each other collectively in a smart way? Again, Howard Brodsky's going to be at the table, BEA will be at the table, the HHS, building that and figuring out what that's going to look like. And that's a good long-term, we're excited about that possibility. And so again, really looking, and I'm looking at Warren, and Warren is all, it's been fascinating to us that many of these childcare businesses don't know that SBDC is there for them. They've recently learned that. Warren came out in the beginning of the pandemic on a big Zoom call to tell people about what he could do to help them with their PPP and this and that. That was the first time they ever knew about the SBDC. Sure, they're all businesses, but they have not been really connected. McCall has talked recently about, okay, all the things that BEA does and all the free business resource specialists that can come and help them as well. And all these other programs that BEA runs that are available to childcare businesses just as much as any other small business. But again, they didn't know about it. So part of what we want to do is collectively work to make sure that folks know about and avail themselves of these resources. So Cellissa.
Thanks, Jackie. I want to elaborate on one more part of the CELA work that we began about 18 months ago after learning about this model and this approach in other states. I had the opportunity to go visit some of these models that I'm going to talk about and see sort of in the trenches, how do they make this work? And it's something, we call it coming together as a hub. It's sort of the deepest level of a shared service alliance and how you can collaborate. And it's sharing staff, it's deepening specialization, areas of specialization. But it's really, if you think about it, it's like helping small to medium-sized independent programs contract for back office services so that their back office services will be stronger and so that they can tap into the scale and the specialization that large companies have. And so we began this pilot about 18 months ago in Stratford County, and it's actually Community Action Partnership of Stratford County that is serving as the hub or the back office services, and 4 programs that had been founding members of CELA and working together and known each other for a long, long time, had long-term directors, agreed to pilot in this approach. And so it's one of the strategies that can be the most transformational for childcare businesses in ensuring that they have strong financial systems, that they have a highly skilled person doing that work, which is very hard for them to afford when they do it alone. And so we've seen some really great results of that work, and there's more to do. But this is a strategy that can have a really profound effect, and it takes time. It's not one of those really quick, let's get this out, roll this out, and help programs tap into this right away, because you need to build trust. They need to be willing to consider doing business very differently. One of our shared service gurus, national gurus, Louise Stoney, I think she's the one who said this, but programs will come from either a place of deep, deep inspiration or deep, deep desperation in order to engage in this kind of business model. But it really is transformational, and it helps get the work done in a more cost-effective way with someone with the right skill set. So that we wanted to talk about a little, I just wanted to bring your attention to. I think, one of the other things that I think we should touch upon and give you just an update about is that there are efforts underway to help build the pipeline back. And one of the things that Jackie may be able to elaborate on this more, but a number of years ago, and for a long time, there was a really strong program in New Hampshire that was funded through Perkins grant funding, and high schools throughout the state offered early childhood training to high school students so that by the time somebody graduated from high school, they had enough credits, enough college credits in early childhood education to be associate teacher qualified and to work in a program. And several years ago, the state eliminated those programs because the field doesn't pay a livable wage or a living wage. And it's something that we know made a huge difference in recruiting people into the field. And we were successful in getting that sort of advocating for that to not be eliminated fully, but unfortunately, a number of those programs had closed down and they haven't been reinstituted. So there are a couple of programs still up and running, but we'd like to see it, New Hampshire get back to having lots of high schools offer this kind of training for a new workforce. Jackie, do you want to talk any more about building the pipeline? Because that's also being considered in what we proposed to Commissioner Caswell.
Absolutely. So the CTEs, the Career and Technical Education Centers, many of them did have early childhood education, childcare, as part of what high school students could do and get some credit for, et cetera, and join the field. And many childcare programs near those community colleges, or, the CTE centers, were able to have interns and apprentices, and it was a nice system. But again, as Cellissa said, oh boy, I'm guessing 7-8 years or so back, Perkins funding, which helped some of this, really just said the field didn't pay enough for this to be a viable career. And so that, unfortunately, was why some of them started folding, is because they genuinely couldn't suggest to a high school student to make a living with a childcare teacher salary. And so two things have to get fixed, right? So, yeah.
So Jackie, I'm wondering if there's anything, if you want to elaborate any further on maybe 3 or 4 of the high level ideas that came out of the convening of business leaders and childcare programs, and then maybe we open it up to questions, other ideas, etc.
Love to. So again, we had a really all-star panel. Many of you could have been on it, where we had some business leaders and some childcare leaders talking about ideas, and it was really an ideas-based fast track conversation to be ready to answer Commissioner Taylor Caswell's challenge to come back with some ideas that could work. And one of them is, again, because Go for Dollars is really there for a one-time use. What kind of amplification of a one-time infusion of funds could really make a difference? Whether it's bridging to something else or whether it's a one-time build of something. Folks during the sessions, business folks and childcare folks thought about building something where you could have a new branding. That all this could be part of. So branding. So how there's New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. Could there be some way of channeling charitable donations into the childcare world, into the childcare businesses, again, a collective way, collectively many businesses and collectively many childcare businesses, that you could brand yourself as it has to be created. But again, we'll all roll up our sleeves and do it together if there's funding to support that. And so it's this idea for branding of a place for charitable donations to go. Also, could there be also built within this system, and it doesn't have to be a new system, it could be building or amplifying something that already exists, looking across what already exists, of how could businesses know where the openings are? Right? Again, we have to fix the fact that it's not just, the problem isn't that there's a lot of empty openings, there's closed classrooms without staff. So you've got to fix that. But at the same time, there's going to be openings. And when those openings are there, how can businesses know where they are, help their employees know where they are, help their employees perhaps offset the cost? Again, a system of a real-time system of knowing where the openings are, businesses being able to support their employees to get those openings. What could be built, what could be done, what could be amplified. And again, in a way that's helping the childcare business too, these prepaid slots, or these, again, it strengthens their program to know they have prepaid slots. Again, always with an eye to equity. There are employees out there whose businesses may not be able to or want to be part of the system, yet they should have openings, and they should have access to openings. They should, especially those families that are most vulnerable right now, earning the lower incomes. We want to make sure this system that's built, again, partnering with DHHS that already has a system in place, what could be amplified so that it's really available to all employees. And the last thing, in addition to connecting and finding openings and finding spots and expanding, knowing you don't have enough slots once you've filled everything. What are the expansion opportunities here for more programs to be available? But also, this idea again of helping your employees, your business. You've got expectant families are your employees. You've got, James, you've got a 3-year-old. Your employer could actually be given the resources to directly to you say, hey, here are some wonderful child development tools that every parent can use. And I'll put them in the chat too, James, for anyone. There are some amazing child development tools that help with parenting, help with promoting child development, separate from an opening. But employers, as part of being a branded New Hampshire, businesses for early learning, whatever we want to call it, here are some free resources for you. Hey, did you know this existed? And this is a great resource for you. It's a really sort of a welcome new baby kit, as well as you've got a 3-year-old kit. And it could be really a supportive way for an employer to communicate already out there free resources. So it's really exciting that this could all be built together with business folks and childcare business folks and Department of BEA and DHHS and others. Thank you.
Could I ask, and I apologize if everybody already knows the answer to this, but I don't personally understand it. On a very basic level, I'm certainly on the surface as a parent, childcare seems very expensive, right? Can you just explain a little bit, like absolute basics? Why is that not a profitable business model, and why are people paid so little?
I love that question, Nancy, because that is the first thing everyone asks, understandably. And I'm going to give you my response to that, but Cellissa may want to add on to that. What's interesting about it is because it's very much a ratio thing, and it's very much the way the businesses are built. So it's very staff heavy. So some childcare programs are nonprofits and some childcare programs are privately owned. Nancy, we don't use the term for-profit because actually some of the privately owned programs, some of the owners actually don't draw a salary depending on the year. They actually, for-profit is a misnomer, but they are privately owned. Very similarly, 80 to 90% of their budgets are their staffing. Okay, this is a very heavily intense, budget in terms of personnel. Then they have some, they obviously have facilities and supplies and et cetera, but honestly, you can't really make a big difference by scrimping on Cheerios and Legos, right? That's a tiny part of a childcare budget. It's 80 to 90% is your staff. And 80 to 90 to 100% of your staff, if you're privately owned, is parent tuition. Now, the state happily does have, and this is a federal thing that the state does as well, it offsets the fee for some income eligible families, right? But it's still the same fee. So whether it's a person coming in who's not eligible for the scholarship or subsidy, or whether it's a family that some of the subsidy is from the state and they pay the rest, it's still let's just say $150 a week. So they're not making any more, there's no new revenue for which parents you serve. And so, honestly, it's your largest part of your budget is the tuition, and the largest of your income, and the largest part of your expenses are the people who are there with the kids. For infants, it's a ratio of 1 to 4, etc. If everyone just had school age with the higher ratios, it's a little easier to afford. It's just the math. It's very confusing as a parent to be paying more than you can afford, but there's nothing else really coming in. That's one of the hopes here, actually, is having this new charitable giving coming from businesses. And Nancy, I'll be honest, I think, federal government will be playing a role like it does with the public school system. Right? That it really shouldn't be on the backs only of the parents, really, is where it is now. And feel free to ask more questions if that's not clear enough. Cellissa, would you add anything?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. I think, I want to just talk a little bit more about why the staffing is such a high percentage, and the fact that staffing patterns, you don't necessarily, it's not necessarily apparent until you get into the weeds of it. But if you think about a typical childcare program, they are likely open 10, maybe even 11 hours a day. And a teacher doesn't work 10 or 11 hours a day. So you have staggered shifts. You have your opening team crew and you have your closing crew. And then you have maybe the part-time support staff so that you have enough people in the classroom at opening time as the children arrive. I think it's also really important to note, in my own personal experience, is that infant classrooms and toddler classrooms operate in the red. You cannot charge enough and keep the group size small enough and the ratio low enough to have high quality to actually break even. And so you're relying on your 5-year-olds or your school age kids to offset that loss. And so I don't think there is a program out there that breaks even with infant care. It's like you're always wrestling with this. We need to charge a little bit more so that we can afford raises and increase insurance costs and et cetera. But we can't raise it so much that now families can't afford to come. So I don't know if that's helpful to just sort of understand a little bit more in the weeds. It's like in an infant classroom, yes, you may be permitted to have 1 to 4, but 1 to 3 may be what you think is better quality or helps your teachers not burn out. Because if you can imagine, or like 1 to 4, 1 to 5 with 1-year-olds, can you imagine what it would be like to be 8 hours with 5 1-year-olds? That's intense. And so it takes a lot of staffing throughout the day to cover the hours that you're open and to have high quality and support children's early learning.
And to sort of repeat, I guess for people who haven't had kids in childcare for a while and may have had a different experience, because this was something that I didn't realize before going in. Those are like that 1 to 4 for infants is a mandated minimum teacher ratio for that age group. And it gets a little bit lower as the kids get older. And we just transitioned to the oldest classroom after months of bouncing back and forth because my daughter was one of the older ones. So they would kick her out of the class when they needed to make the numbers work.
Yeah, it's almost an analogy is sort of, you don't see standalone ICU units in a hospital. They use a lot of other things to, but ICU units don't break even. Toddler, infant, you need a lot of other things to help you break even. But again, you don't break even because you're paying your staff less than you want to or should, and you're charging your parents more than they can afford. It's that dilemma.
So I would imagine with those staff, minimum required staffing ratios, and you mentioning that infant rooms cannot possibly break even, sort of illuminates that a little bit for me. But I would imagine that for a given daycare center, their margin of being able to make ends meet is probably down to a handful of enrollment slots at a given time.
That's exactly right.
I'm so glad you said that. I think we should elaborate that just a tiny bit more. But when I managed a program, our budget was $1.3 million, and our margin was at best $30,000, and that's less than 3 children for the whole year. Out of 150 children enrolled during the course of the year, being down 3 spots is the difference between being in the black or being in the red. So yeah, and I want to say, in my early years, I was sure I was going to solve this. In my early years at the program where Warren's children came. And then honestly, within 5 or 6 years, I had to recognize there's no way to solve this alone. It's going to take collaboration, innovation, and other strategies to make this different.
Could I ask, it sounds like you visit some other states that have different models. In a general sense, are there states where there is more state support? Or is it sort of across the board? This is how it is.
And I think I lost you just for a second there, Nancy. Are there states where, can you say it again for me?
Sure, sorry. Are there, like, is New Hampshire a particular outlier in the way it funds childcare, or is that just across the board, across the country?
Absolutely across the board. There are some really good models with good infusions of private or business funding that makes a difference. But primarily, and again, that's for like a select few models in different states, but it's really across the board, across all states. What's nice about this issue as well is some of this, it's very much a purple issue, red and blue. It's not a partisan issue at all. And so that's been very helpful. And SB 446, of course, is a bipartisan bill as well. So, but it's universal, Nancy. That's why I do keep mentioning the federal government. I do think, we will get there. But right now, we need to do whatever we can.
Warren, I can see you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Cellissa and Jackie. This was just a terrific overview of the problems that daycares are facing. And you were right, Jackie, that we did help a lot of daycare centers and childcare centers at the beginning. And I was disappointed that many of them did not stick with us because, the problem is it's just gotten worse. When my kids were in Growing Places and Durham Infant Center that Cellissa was the executive director of, childcare was expensive then as well. And I think the problem has gotten worse. I have a granddaughter who just started daycare a month ago today. And, it's just, 2 kids is that much more unaffordable for parents. And it's the whole industry is so squeezed around the affordability of being able to retain and attract new and talented individuals and being able to keep their costs down. It's just such a squeezed situation. So I wonder, this charitable giving is great. I wonder if SB, you said, Jackie, that SB 446 was bipartisan. So that's really good news. But if you think about what some of the plans have been over the past year or so, Build Back Better had a lot of childcare money in it. That would have helped. That did not get passed. And also the child tax credit, although that doesn't help daycares, it helps the parents of daycare. And I think that the child tax credit, expired January 1st. But we would like to, at the SBDC, we have started these more industry specific trainings. We started first with outdoor rec. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Scott Crowder and Janelle Lawton from the BEA, because they've been terrific in that program. But wanted to talk to you, we could do this offline, Jackie and Cellissa, to see if you have an interest in working with us to help provide more industry specific trainings. We can talk offline about that.
Yes, we don't need to talk offline. Yes. What's been fascinating, Warren, and what we've learned as well, both internally and externally, is the support needed for folks to actually use some of these supports. And it's not an incompetence issue, it's an overwhelmed issue, being overwhelmed issue. So what's been fascinating for us is that Early Learn New Hampshire has been around for I should know the answer to this, 18 years. And we've always done advocacy. We've always done some membership services and meetings. Prior to the pandemic, there were 20 to 25 who would attend our monthly meetings of the 700 and so childcare programs, because those were the activists. Those are the ones. Right now, twice a month now, not just once a month, because of Zoom and because of people's interest, we have over 140 attending twice a month. So we know when things should happen, how things should happen. Recording makes a big difference. People are watching them afterwards. So I think this is a really good time to implement something like that while having supports like the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, CELA, others that are out there that are really people that are there to help them use these things, not just tell them about it. telling them about it helps, but the support to use them and avail themselves of it is part of our plan.
So what we would love to, okay.
So, sorry, hold that thought, Warren. Don't forget what you were going to say. I want to just elaborate a little more on that, because what has happened during the pandemic and the staffing shortage is that directors are in the classroom now every day, not necessarily all day, but a much larger portion of their time. So what our approach with Cellissa has sort of shifted to what we consider a navigator approach, which is sort of twofold: do it where we do it for you if you need us to, or we do it with you. But it needs to be so much deeper than just training. It needs to be TA and support and guidance, and do what we can for them, because their time is so stretched right now.
So for this industry specific training, the way we would like to do it, again, we could talk offline about this, but would be 3 days, finance the first session, marketing the second session, and HR and employees the third session.
That would be lovely. And again, I saw in your plan this idea of making sure they know about all the different grants and other resources and financing that's available to them. That again, you know, will be attractive.
Thank you, Robin.
Hi, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but it's worth noting that only 1 in 3 businesses even provide healthcare to employees in 2022, and that is declining. And I guess my comment is that it's naive to think that this kind of support is consistent with the American culture, even though we see it in all of the Western countries around the world, including Canada. And Warren, I think you make a really good point. It's appalling to me and shocking that this was pulled out of Build Back Better. That, I guess, is neither here nor there, but I guess what I would offer is, I think, to think that this is going to be resolved by the private sector, from my perspective, is very idealistic. And
Robin,
so,
yeah.
put that aside, I guess. Yes, I'm sorry. But
Robin,
the other thing I would offer that maybe, the other thing that I would offer that might be a little more positive is, and I was thinking out loud, Henry Brodsky works with Nick Sagoo over at Silvertech in Manchester, and Nick is very charitable. And I think that one idea that would be helpful would be a statewide website for availability and spaces broken into regions. So there would be a tab for each region, and within that region, every single approved daycare center would be listed in that, with the cost and the hours, and those are my 2 thoughts this morning.
Well, if I may, thank you, Robin. It wasn't Debbie Downer, it was factual. And when you said 1/3, may I ask, 1/3 of all businesses in New Hampshire, or 1/3 of childcare businesses?
No, 1/3 of businesses, only 1 out of every 3 businesses in New Hampshire, and this is sweeping across the trend, is consistent with the country, that is no longer even providing healthcare.
Yeah.
And so it is, and in New Hampshire is dominated, as we all know, by owner-operated businesses. 80% of our profile, Warren, I don't want to be you, but 80% of our businesses are owner-operated businesses, with a very small percentage being larger companies.
Right.
And it's arguable whether or not the smaller businesses have the resource to provide medical benefits and healthcare or not. But our American system is that healthcare is provided by the private sector versus the public sector. And
Right.
in my head, if anything is pivoting this country to an ideology that understands there are functions and services that have to be provided from a federal level. But as we all know, this country is very reluctant and very slow as that, again, as witnessed by this subject matter being pulled out of the Build Back Better funding. So, I don't know what all that means, but I think a comprehensive website would be helpful. And I think the awareness that this, that to the extent that businesses are no longer even providing healthcare, unless you're a government employee, it's really rare that you get healthcare from your employer.
Right.
And unless it's one of the few 20% in this state of larger employers that do provide it. So
So thank you, Robin. I mean, I think that's
It's-
important to point out. I think,
It's
you
a
know,
rude awakening.
yeah, and I think, we're not suggesting, and I hope we didn't, suggest that this is a silver bullet, having the private sector help the childcare programs and everything's rosy. But it's important to make things better as we look towards longer term, bigger federal solutions. I think it's really important not just to sit on our hands, because what happens if we sit on our hands and say, well, we can't do anything because it's such a big problem, nothing changes. And we've done that for 30 years. We've been trying. I really do think that Howard Brodsky and Nick Sobu, exactly, he gets it too. I know who I know who you're talking about.
And Howard and Nick are friends.
I
so-
know. And so I think we can do things creatively and well, and it'll strengthen. It won't solve
Agreed.
everything.
I so applaud you, and
Thank you.
I think it's so important and overdue, and it just can't be overstated or understated how big this issue is and how it does ultimately affect our economy, our socioeconomic systems. I'm just completely grateful, and it's a big job you have. It's a big job we have.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions right now? I'm trying to monitor the chat to see if there's some. Is there, well, one question I was just thinking of, which you kind of touched on, but is there specific efforts or advocacy to create like insurance pools or anything amongst childcare businesses?
Yeah. So there's not a bill at this point, but the way CELA operates, there are some insurances that are in there. There is a nationally negotiated health insurance product that is more affordable than if you were all by yourself going in the market. However, again, it doesn't solve what Robin said collectively but there are the CELA model, which again is an economy of scale joint purchasing program, as well as there's lots of other terrific things about it. But it does have, through our partners, our business partners, there's negotiated discounts for health insurance, for telehealth. Quite remarkable help with telehealth that is putting money back in the pockets of the workforce because there's no copay to it. And 71% of why they may need to see a doctor during the year, besides primary physicals with their primary care, can be expertly handled by telehealth. And we've been rolling that out recently. It is game changing for the workforce. And so that's there. There is workers' comp, liability, commercial insurance for the programs. There's auto insurance and homeowners insurances, renters insurances for the staff, even for some of the families we serve. It's not a bill, but it's already there. So again, we can go into a lot of depth about this, but it's really been remarkable what the businesses have been able to negotiate on behalf of childcare programs. Now it's time, Nancy and others, to bring it to scale. Yeah.
Thank you. You guys have really answered so many of the sort of lingering questions that I've had around this issue. And apart from becoming Sweden overnight, there's a lot to do. I will say, it's funny, Zuzi, who's on the call here, is from Slovakia, right, Zuzi? And she was sort of quizzing me about different things about having a child, and she was just flabbergasted that, there's no free daycare, no free, like, just could not believe it. So it's such a different system. And I can definitely say, having grown up in Ireland and then having a child here, it's just so much part of the culture that you're just on your own to figure it out.
And Nancy, may I say to that, I thank you for saying that. And maybe 15 years ago, the editor of the Concord Monitor, when they were doing an article, said, imagine what the public schools would look like if only the parents who used it paid for it. Just imagine, right? It would look like childcare does today. So it is a real collective change we all need to make. Yeah.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any more questions? We're just about coming up on 10 o'clock.
or ideas. We welcome any ideas that any of this discussion may have sparked.
I have a question. How can we change and increase the recognition of the value of care? Because the word child care, it should be changed to child work. It's just like health care. It's very emotional. It's not economical. And so people are like, oh, child care, how warm and fuzzy. You know, that's what parents do. It's work. And we need to increase the recognition, the value of that care/work. So how do we do that? That's just my take. And I'm a grandma, so.
And Barbara, if you don't mind, where do you work? What do you do, Barbara?
I am retired now. And
Great.
I sit and I pass the word around about what's going on these kinds of meetings. And
Fabulous.
I'm working on the housing issue mostly, so.
Okay, well, thank you, Barbara. You know, I've been doing this in New Hampshire for 30+ years, and those kinds of, the word care, you're right, that it can be a trigger for some. What's been interesting for me is no longer does the legislature, and again, bipartisan, and no longer do some of the policymakers say why. Why is this important anymore? Even though we use the word care in childcare, sometimes people call it early childhood education. There's different words for it, but we're not hearing that anymore the way we used to. Well, my wife stayed home and we sacrificed and we only needed one car. There's, you know, there have been lots of things we've heard in the past. We don't hear it anymore. We get it, we know why it's important, and it's usually because of the current workforce versus the future workforce, but it's the how. What do we do? What will it cost? Not the why anymore, Barbara. It's been very heartening.
That's great to hear.
Just last thoughts, and I'm wondering, Jackie, if because this is more your bandwidth and something that you really focus on in the work, is staying connected and involving others from other regions. We've been participating in some discussions with the Upper Valley. There's some really well-funded deep dive discussion going on there to try to come up with strategies. I think, Jackie, you want to see what your thoughts are or questions about how we could continue this work and rally together around solutions?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I've used the word our plan or this plan. What I've talked about, what I'm referring to again, is a very specific ask for gopher dollars. That's just one thing. It's not the silver bullet. As soon as we make that ask to Commissioner Taylor Caswell, we will let everyone know what that ask was. But I think he deserves to see it first. And so, we are good. I'm really open to what you think. I mean, I love the talk about regionalization. I'd love to talk, you know, and again, as this gets built, this idea of how businesses and childcare can formally come together, what Robin was talking about where the openings are and building something that, you know, collectively, I think obviously all the economic development regions should be part of it. How, we're open to suggestions, but the point is coming together thoughtfully and planfully on an ongoing basis. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, initial thoughts, we, you know, maintain a contact list for these calls on a regular basis. If you'd like to be added to, you know, be able to keep tabs on what we're talking about. You know, currently we're still meeting once a week on Tuesday mornings every week. So, you know, you have my contact information. Please absolutely feel free to reach out if there are, you know, some more specific things that you want to come back in the future to get in front of this group. You know, I think we're definitely open to keeping that conversation going. Okay. Any final thoughts?
This is Miguel from the SBA. Jackie, I wanted to say thank you so very much for doing this. my wife and I actually ran a childcare business for 19 years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
We closed it down about 5 years ago, but this is fantastic of what you're doing. It's great to see this.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And Mike Vlasic was one of in this fast track process, was one of our panel speakers. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Any other quick comments, questions from the group? If not, quick update. I've confirmed with David Choate that he will be able to attend on the 22nd to have a conversation about some of the real estate and business relocation issues that we were discussing. This morning, I also reached out to BEA to see if somebody from their Office of International Commerce would be able to join us next week to talk about how the situation in Ukraine may or may not be impacting New Hampshire businesses and any of the follow-on effects from sanctions, shipping costs, energy costs, what have you. So Adam has confirmed that he's available and he is checking up to see whether there might be somebody else who would be interested to join him. So we'll be getting that agenda pulled together in the next couple days. And then I have not yet reached out to the HR Association, but I will do that this week, tentatively seeing if somebody's available for the 15th. Okay. Anything else for the good of the group? Not seeing any hands, so thank you all for your time this morning. This was a great conversation. As always, we do have this recorded, so Mikhail, Teresa, I know we weren't able to pull this together fast enough to invite the other seaters, but maybe we can distribute the recording to other folks if they're interested. All right, thank you all.